In the quiet, well-kept town of Bushey, Hertfordshire, nestled just north of London, the Hunt family's home stood as a picture of warmth, stability, and a life built on love and routine. Their house on Ashland Close was not particularly extravagant, but it exuded a lived-in comfort, the kind of place where the sound of laughter could echo down the hallway on a lazy Sunday morning, and where neighbors would often describe seeing the family tending the garden or walking their dog with a natural sense of ease. The Hunt family, Carol, Hannah, and Louise, were the kind of people you felt you knew even if you'd only met them once. They left a mark through simple, daily gestures, a kind smile, a helpful hand, or a chat across the garden fence. At the heart of their home was Carol Hunt, a woman who radiated maternal energy. She was the wife of respected BBC racing commentator John Hunt and, in many ways, the quiet engine that powered the family's world. Carol was not a public figure in the way her husband was, but she was well known in her own right within their community. Her warmth, attentiveness, and organizational skill held their household together with grace. Friends often spoke of her generosity, of how she made you feel heard and valued during conversations, and of her love for her daughters, which was evident in everything she did. She had once worked in the medical field and later took on roles that allowed her to focus more time at home. Carol was deeply involved in her daughters' lives, their confidant and guide, the steady voice that made even the most chaotic days feel manageable. Her two daughters, Hannah and Louise, were different in temperament, yet equally beloved by everyone who knew them. Hannah, the eldest, was 28 years old and had forged a career in beauty therapy. She was a professional who not only had skill in her trade, but also a genuine touch with clients, many of whom returned to her not just for services, but for the calming presence she brought to each appointment. She had a gentle way about her, often described as kind and soft-spoken, but there was an undeniable strength beneath her surface. Hannah had dreams of expanding her practice, perhaps opening a small studio of her own one day, and she was steadily working toward that goal with both patience and drive. Friends from her school days remembered her as loyal and compassionate, someone who always had time to listen. Her clients praised not just her abilities, but also her demeanor, which made them feel at ease the moment they walked through the door. She had a love for fashion, always choosing outfits that reflected her sense of style and confidence without ever coming off as flashy. Hannah was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, who checked in just because, and who never left anyone feeling forgotten. Louise, just 25, had followed a different path, one that led her into the world of animals. She had a passion for veterinary care and worked in an animal rescue center, where she was known for her dedication and fierce protective instincts when it came to the creatures under her care. If a dog had been neglected or injured, Louise was the one who would stay late to make sure it received everything it needed. Her coworkers admired her grit and her deep empathy. She was also the more spirited of the two sisters, known for her quick wit and infectious laughter. While Hannah had a quiet elegance, Louise had a spark that made her stand out in a crowd. But despite their differences, the sisters were close. They often spent weekends together, whether it was shopping in Watford, binge-watching crime dramas on the couch, or taking long walks through the nearby parks with their family dog. The sisters were not just siblings but best friends, their bond made stronger by the love and safety they had grown up with in their family home. The Hunt household was one where birthdays were celebrated with homemade cakes and hand-picked gifts, where holidays meant family dinners and matching pajamas, and where the walls were covered in framed memories, school photos, vacation snapshots, candid moments captured during lazy afternoons in the garden. Though John Hunt's job as a BBC commentator often kept him away during major sporting events, he was still very much present in his daughters' lives. When he was home, he was engaged, the kind of father who took genuine interest in his daughter's passions. Whether it was discussing career ambitions with Hannah or sharing videos of animals with Louise, his love for his family was unwavering. The family's shared moments were full of humor and care. Evenings were often spent watching TV together, sharing meals Carol had cooked from scratch, and simply talking about their day. They were a unit, deeply connected, and it was evident in how they moved through the world. Together, present and whole. Their connection extended beyond their household. Carol was active in the local community and often participated in charity events. She volunteered at the local church's food drives, helped organize school fundraisers when her daughters were younger, and was the kind of neighbor who would bring soup to a sick friend or watch a pet while someone was away. Louise had recently taken up organizing animal welfare campaigns on social media, and Hannah donated her time to offering free beauty treatments to women in shelters during the holidays. There was a through line of compassion that ran through all three women, shaped by their values and the life Carol and John had built together. Those who lived nearby often commented on how the Hunts seemed to be the kind of family people aspired to be. They had love, structure, and an honest sense of care for one another that could be felt, not just seen. The community held them in high regard, and the Hunt home became a symbol of something quietly admirable, a place where good people lived. But beneath the serenity of their daily routines, the Hunt family had also weathered life's typical struggles. They had faced illness, career setbacks, moments of doubt, and even personal betrayals, but always with a spirit of resilience. Carol had been the one to hold the family steady during tough times. She had the strength of a woman who knew how to endure, how to push through heartache with dignity, and how to keep her family intact when the world outside grew uncertain. Her daughters learned from her how to be self-sufficient, how to trust their instincts, and how to hold on to hope even when things got difficult. And it was perhaps this sense of inner strength and mutual support that made the subsequent events so jarring. Nothing in their world suggested the danger that was to come. There were no dramatic feuds, no chaos brewing just below the surface. Their lives, from the outside and to those closest to them, seemed rooted in peace. In the final days before the tragedy, the family's activities appeared entirely normal. Louise had recently shared photos on social media of a new dog brought into her care, while Hannah posted a smiling selfie with a caption about self-care and spring skincare tips. Carol had been spotted chatting with a neighbor while tending to her flowers, and there had been laughter from inside their home one evening, a quiet Friday when the world outside was still. Nothing about these last moments hinted at violence, or fear, or unraveling. This was the calm before the storm, a serene stretch of life where love lingered in every room and routine carried on, uninterrupted. No one could have known that such warmth and stability were about to be shattered in a single night. What was once a sanctuary would soon become the scene of an unthinkable act, and the world would come to know the names Carol, Hannah, and Louise Hunt not for how they lived, but for the way their lives were taken. But before all of that, they were simply a mother and her daughters, living a quiet, meaningful life in a peaceful English town, surrounded by love, guided by kindness, and completely unaware of the darkness about to break through their door. This section explores the complex and unsettling life of Kyle Clifford, the man accused of ending the lives of Carol, Hannah, and Louise Hunt. We delve into his upbringing, tracing back to his childhood and formative years, seeking patterns of behavior that might hint at internal struggles or emotional instability. His time in the British Army is examined closely, particularly the circumstances of his departure and any signs of trauma or behavioral deterioration during or after service. Accounts from those who knew him, friends, family, former colleagues, paint a picture of someone who may have been spiraling long before the tragedy. Central to this narrative is his relationship with Hannah Hunt. We explore how they met, the dynamics of their time together, and any red flags that may have been overlooked, signs of possessiveness, isolation, or anger that, in hindsight, point to a dangerous undercurrent. This section raises difficult but important questions. Were there opportunities to intervene? And how did a man once entrusted to serve his country become the center of a chilling triple homicide? Here, we reconstruct the horrifying timeline of the murders in painstaking detail, beginning with the early hours of that fateful day. Using verified police statements, forensic evidence, and eyewitness accounts, this segment charts how a peaceful Tuesday in Bushey turned into one of the most shocking crime scenes in recent memory. We follow Kyle Clifford's movements leading up to the attack, piecing together how he entered the Hunt home and carried out the killings using a crossbow and other weapons. The brutality of the act is laid bare, not for shock value, but to emphasize the sheer violence and finality of what occurred. This is also where we explore the chilling silence that followed the assault until emergency services responded to a distress call and found the bodies. The quiet street, once a place of safety and community, was transformed into a scene of devastation. The emotional tone is heavy here, reflecting not just the physical horror of the murders, but the sudden, irreversible loss felt by loved ones, neighbors, and a public left stunned by the savage nature of the attack. When the quiet calm of Bushey was shattered by the brutal slaying of 3 women inside a family home, the shock did not end with the discovery of the bodies. In fact, for many, the fear was just beginning. As investigators processed the gruesome crime scene, one terrifying truth became immediately clear. Kyle Clifford, the man suspected of committing the atrocity, was not in custody. He had vanished. What followed was not just a search. It was a race against time. A man capable of killing 3 women with a crossbow and other weapons was on the run, and the entire country watched in collective dread as authorities launched an intense manhunt that would stretch across county lines and shake communities with its urgency. The moment police officers arrived at the Hunt family's residence and found the 3 victims, it was evident this was not a random act of violence. The targeted nature of the killings, the use of a crossbow, an uncommon weapon in modern British crimes, and the relationship between the suspect and one of the victims pointed to something personal, something calculated. While forensic teams worked through the night under the eerie blue lights flashing across the suburban street, another group of professionals, the armed response units and intelligence officers, were already coordinating a nationwide effort to find Clifford before he could disappear further or hurt anyone else. With Bushey sealed off as a crime scene, nearby roads were monitored and police presence was bolstered in surrounding towns. Surveillance footage became one of the primary tools investigators leaned on. Officers reviewed hours of CCTV recordings from public transit systems, petrol stations, shops, and traffic cameras. They followed a digital breadcrumb trail that began near the Hunt residence and led them across county borders toward Enfield in North London, an area Clifford was believed to know well. He had grown up not far from there, and police theorized he may be returning to familiar ground, either to hide or to prepare for something even more catastrophic. Simultaneously, the Hertfordshire Constabulary issued urgent warnings to the public. Photos of Clifford were released across media platforms, along with stern advisories not to approach him under any circumstances. The image of the young man, clean-shaven, serious-faced, and dressed in dark clothing, became instantly recognizable, haunting headlines and social media timelines. He was described as armed and dangerous, with a particular emphasis on the crossbow, which had now become a symbol of terror for a public unaccustomed to such medieval brutality. The warnings struck a nerve. This was no ordinary manhunt. This was a frantic attempt to intercept a suspect with both the capacity and the apparent will to kill again. Across the nation, tension simmered. Schools near Bushey were put on high alert. Doors that usually remained open in safe communities were suddenly bolted shut. People watched from windows. Social media buzzed with sightings, fears, and theories. Community WhatsApp groups filled with real-time updates, some credible, many not, as the population turned into an ad hoc network of amateur detectives, fueled by fear and a desire to see the man behind such carnage brought to justice. Every noise outside was a cause for concern. Every unknown car parked on a quiet street raised suspicions. The psychological impact on the public was palpable. For residents of Bushey, knowing a triple killer had walked among them just hours before, and may have still been lurking nearby, created a climate of paranoia. For the wider public, the fact that someone had used a crossbow, a weapon both archaic and brutal, triggered debates on safety, regulation, and how something so horrific could happen seemingly out of nowhere. Mothers held their children closer, and partners looked at each other with a new kind of uncertainty. If a young woman like Hannah Hunt, described by friends as kind, joyful, and driven, could fall into a deadly relationship without realizing the depths of danger, who else might be at risk? Meanwhile, law enforcement resources were stretched to capacity. The Metropolitan Police, armed units, K-9 teams, and air support collaborated with regional forces. Intelligence officers worked around the clock to piece together Clifford's potential escape routes. They spoke with his family, friends, former army contacts. Every call, every surveillance feed, every license plate recognition alert was scrutinized. But Clifford, it seemed, had vanished. That is, until the following day. It was in Enfield, a borough in North London not far from where Clifford was known to have family ties, that the breakthrough came. Just over 24 hours after the murders, authorities received a tip that led them to a wooded area on the outskirts of the town. There, slumped and injured, they found the man they had been desperately searching for. Kyle Clifford was alive, but only just. He had sustained what appeared to be self-inflicted injuries. The nature of those injuries, serious, but not immediately fatal, raised urgent questions. Had he been planning to kill himself after the attack? Had he lost his nerve? Or was he trying to disappear completely, erasing himself as a final act of control? Paramedics arrived on scene, and Clifford was rushed to a hospital under armed guard. Police confirmed his identity and reassured the public that the immediate threat had passed. But for many, the relief was muted. Yes, the suspect was in custody, and yes, the manhunt was over, but the weight of what had transpired lingered heavily. The images of Carol, Hannah, and Louise Hunt, 3 women whose lives were violently stolen, remained burned into the national consciousness. The sight of armed officers combing through a peaceful neighborhood, the sound of helicopters circling overhead, the sense of helplessness that had gripped communities during those long, uncertain hours. These things could not be undone. This section of the story is not just about the pursuit of a suspect. It's about the collective trauma experienced when evil erupts without warning. It's about a country suddenly reminded of how fragile safety can be. It's about the desperation of justice reaching for a man who had already crossed a line from which there was no return. And it's about the human need, in the face of unthinkable violence, to see order restored, even if nothing will ever be quite the same again. This section focuses on the profound impact the murders had on the Hunt family, especially on John Hunt, the BBC racing commentator, who was left to cope with unimaginable loss. It explores heartfelt tributes from colleagues, friends, and the wider community, showing how deeply the family was loved and respected. The narrative also covers the national reaction, including vigils held in memory of Carol, Hannah, and Louise, and how social media became a space for collective mourning and support. Additionally, it looks at how media coverage shaped public understanding of the tragedy, sparking important conversations about domestic violence and the regulation of weapons like crossbows. This part reveals not only the personal grief, but also the wider societal shock and the ongoing dialogue around preventing similar tragedies. This section delves deeply into the aftermath of Kyle Clifford's arrest following the tragic murders of the Hunt family. After being found with self-inflicted injuries in Enfield, Clifford was immediately taken into medical care, highlighting the complex nature of handling suspects who are both accused of violent crimes and themselves in a vulnerable physical and psychological state. The narrative follows his transition from emergency treatment to custody, setting the stage for the pending legal process. The section then explores the formal charges brought against Clifford, detailing how the Crown Prosecution Service and law enforcement agencies have framed the case. Official statements from police and prosecutors provide insight into the strength of the evidence, the gravity of the charges, and the anticipated trajectory of the investigation. Further, the story examines public reaction, ranging from shock and anger to sorrow and calls for justice, reflecting a community grappling with the brutal loss and the difficult task of seeking closure. There is also an exploration of the complexities surrounding Clifford's mental health, informed by experts in criminal psychology and legal scholars who discuss how mental illness can influence culpability and courtroom proceedings. This includes an analysis of possible defenses, such as diminished responsibility or insanity, and how these might affect the outcome of the trial. In addition, the section considers broader societal and legal questions raised by the case, such as how the justice system balances punishment with rehabilitation, especially in cases involving extreme violence and psychological distress. It touches on the role of victim impact statements, the importance of fair trial rights, and the challenges courts face in high-profile cases that attract intense media scrutiny. Because the legal process is ongoing, This part is designed to be adaptable, acknowledging that new developments, court rulings, and official statements may shift the narrative. Ultimately, this section aims to provide a comprehensive overview of the path toward justice for the Hunt family, the legal hurdles ahead, and the broader implications for society when confronting such harrowing crimes.